December 7th, 1941. It is known as a date which will live in infamy. The attack on Pearl Harbor was not just a military disaster, it was the single greatest political unifier in American history. Overnight, a nation deeply entrenched in isolationism was catapulted into the greatest global conflict the world had ever known. But what if that date never happened? What if, on December 7th, the bombs never fell, the ships remained afloat, and Japan chose a different path? The answer is not the peaceful alternate history you might expect. The truth is, Pearl Harbor may have been the very thing that saved the Western Allies. This is the story of a far darker timeline, one where the U.S. remained neutral and the consequences reshaped the global balance of power forever. By late 1941, Japan was desperately short on resources, specifically oil, which the U.S. had embargoed. The Japanese High Command had two options: a risky, head-on confrontation with the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor, or a strategic, limited expansion. In our alternate timeline, the strategic voices prevail. Japan decides to focus entirely on Operation C, seizing the resource-rich territories in Southeast Asia. This expansion is brutal, swift, and completely avoids the U.S. naval base in Hawaii. The Philippines, a U.S. territory, is still invaded, but without the shock of Pearl Harbor. President Franklin D. Roosevelt is now in a political crisis. He desperately wants to enter the war, but the American public is still split. Attacking the Philippines is a provocation, but is it enough for Congress to declare war on the Imperial Japanese Army? With no unprovoked attack on U.S. soil, the isolationist movement, led by figures like Charles Lindbergh, remains politically powerful. The U.S. stays officially neutral, providing only lend-lease aid, a critical difference that fundamentally changes the outcome of the European War. The first major consequence is felt not in the Pacific, but across the Atlantic. Without the full force of the U.S. entering the war in December 1941, the German war effort gains a deadly edge. While Lend-Lease aid continues, the volume of material shipped is severely restricted. More importantly, there are no American troops, airmen, or generals to commit to the European theater. D-Day in 1944 is now simply impossible. This delay is fatal to the Soviets. Without the vital American trucks, fuel, and industrial goods channeled through Lend-Lease from 1942 onward, by 1945, Germany is a tired but dominant continental power. They have not been defeated in the East, and the Western Allies, Britain and her Commonwealth, are exhausted, unable to stage a viable invasion of Fortress Europe. The war ends not with Allied victory, but with a negotiated stalemate, a horrific cold peace leaving Hitler in control of vast swathes of Europe. Meanwhile, the Pacific is becoming a Japanese empire. With the U.S. public reluctant to commit to war over the Philippines alone, Congress authorizes only a slow, protracted naval buildup. The strategy is containment, not counterattack. Japan consolidates its resource gains, giving its industrial war machine exactly what it needed. By the time the U.S. finally enters the Pacific War, perhaps after a direct German declaration of war in 1943 or 44, Japan is an economic powerhouse, and its defensive perimeter is nearly impenetrable. This leads to a longer, bloodier war of attrition. There is no rapid island-hopping strategy. The war is fought slowly, costing millions of lives. More critically, the Manhattan Project, the development of the atomic bomb, loses its singular unified focus without the urgency of Pearl Harbor and the public fear of a total war. The war that does eventually end is fought conventionally, with a far more negotiated, less decisive end. Japan retains key territories, and the full decolonization of Asia is dramatically delayed. In this alternate reality, the world is fragmented. Fascism controls continental Europe. The Pacific is a divided sea, and the United States, which sought to avoid conflict, finds itself in a state of permanent, tense confrontation with two powerful, aggressive empires. The brutal truth is that Pearl Harbor, the catastrophic unprovoked attack, was the single event that allowed the U.S. to enter the war with the full unified political will necessary to launch a total war effort, ultimately securing an Allied victory. The consequences of a Japanese decision not to attack Hawaii are terrifying. A divided world where the forces of democracy are perpetually on the back foot. But what do you think? Would the U.S. have found a different reason to enter the war sooner? Let us know your alternate history theories in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to History X for more deep dives into the forks in history's road.